Okay, so good evening, friends. Welcome to this very unique program. And this is unique in several ways. One is that we are discussing a very unique and new subject for most of us. Second is this program is, you can say, initiated by a group of students. Most medical education occurs when teachers initiate the teaching. But this program is initiated by students, so this becomes very unique. Third thing is that this program needs blessings by many of us, and blessings from leaders from pediatrics and leaders from psychiatry, leaders from social sciences, and many other people. But before that, it is the time to learn the subject. So from pediatrician side, pediatric side, today we are there to learn about it. Okay. And so this has been made very clear, and we are blessed with the presence of three very senior persons with us. So we have Dr. C.P. Bansal sir with us, who was the IAP president in 2013, the golden jubilee year of IAP. We have Dr. Santosh Sons with us, who is also a past IAP president and currently chairman of the IAP medical education chapter. So this chapter will take it forward in medical education. And very important person, Dr. J.C. Garg is with us, who is the chairperson of Adolescent Health Academy. And this chapter is entrusted to take this topic to the practicing pediatrician, and about 32,000 are the members of Indian Academy of Pediatrics. So we are taking it two ways. One is to those who are practicing pediatrics, and those to the medical students who are our future practitioners and future pediatricians. Probably Pankudi will join pediatrics. Okay. Right. So before we begin, let me invite Dr. C.P. Bansal sir first, who is the senior most person of IAP here, to give us blessings and say a few words about it.
Thank you so much, Harish. In fact, it's a wonderful beginning, and I do not know much about it. This afternoon only, we were discussing, and I came to know about this unique beginning and initiative of yours. So I thought just I will join and definitely will get something new inside. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to extend my warm wishes, and best of luck to you for this wonderful beginning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Sons is a senior professor of pediatrics and our leader of IAP, and currently chairperson of medical education chapter, who this chapter will take it further. Dr. Sons, sir, your few words of blessings.
Unmute yourself, Santosh.
Can someone unmute Dr. Santosh?
Yes, good evening, respected senior Bansalji, Dr. Bansalji, then Air Commander Dr. Sharma, my secretary in medical education chapter, Dr. Harish Pemde, who has been instrumental in pushing this in Indian Academy of Pediatrics, my good friend Dr. Garg, and all the youngsters who are here, and also the seniors who's there. It's a sort of a, what would say, a groundbreaking day actually for IAP, because you see the students, medical students of Lady Harding Medical College, they've started this initiative. That's a real appreciative thing. There is a concern about this particular subject. It is not the teachers who have started this, the students who have started this, that we need to sort of appreciate you all and congratulate to you all. I am sure with your effort, this demystifying the gender-friendly healthcare, because I don't remember any time my teachers did say something about the gender friendliness. When we had this thing, that divide was there. And I think it's a time has come in the 21st century, we need to sort of demystify, and everybody is equal. everybody is together and we go forward, whatever the gender is. We are not bothered about the gender. It's the human or the people which is important for us. I think in this regard, you have started this demystifying. I'm sure. I think we from the medical education chapter with Dr. Harish and everybody, I think we are going to get this part of it, at least sensitizing this program in our undergraduate curriculum. I think we all take forward this. I think we should be quite happy because a lot of pediatricians are in NMC, and I think we should have some say in putting this small chapter for the undergraduates to lead. With these few words, I wish this program a very success, and I'm sure you will be able to spread across the health line. All the consultants, students, postgraduates, everybody should definitely know about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We have with us Dr. J.C. Garg, sir, who is the chairperson of Adolescent Health Academy, which is, has around 2,500 members. Sir, some words of blessing from your side.
Thank you, Dr. Harish Premde. It is a really matter of pride that we are holding such type of the curriculum in our country where there is no such chapters in the teachings or as the practice. So this is definitely new learning for us also, that we pediatrician adolescent specialists will learn about this and do the betterment for the adolescent, especially for the transgender people, and their rights will be saved, their problems will be solved, and we can do better for them, and they can have the voice through this chapter, through this forum. And I convey all the best wishes for the success of the program to all the participants and the NGOs and whosoever is working in this. I welcome them and wish all the best for the success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And to all the people who have joined today here, I said in the beginning that we are learning. So our language may not be so appropriate. Dr. Sharma is smiling on that. Okay, so please pardon us for that. We have Dr. Sushma Desai with us. Madam, few words from your side. She is the Secretary of Adolescent Health Academy. Yeah, please unmute yourself. No, you don't want to talk? Okay, yeah.
Hello, very good evening, sir.
Yes.
It's a great opportunity for the Adolescent Health Academy to be a part of this such an innovative program. And we are really very thankful to Aarti as well as Lady Harding Medical College, Curentia, to help us get this opportunity, particularly Dr. Harish Demde sir, who is always thinking ahead and is a very innovative thinking. Another thing is Dr. Santosh ji very rightly pointed out, involving the medical students and the program by the medical student in itself is a very good idea. And I'm sure we are going to get a very good learning from this program, because this subject itself is a very new concept for all of us. And we would like to learn a lot from all of this program and the series of webinar. Wishing my best for the success of this program, and thanking again to Dr. Harish Demde sir for bringing such innovative programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sushma, madam. Actually, there is one saying that nothing about us without us. So this program is unique again, that students are also there, teachers are there, practitioners are there, and of course, people from community are also there. One more person who has joined, and I'm surprisingly meeting him after a very, very long time, although electronically, Dr. Rajesh Rastogi, sir. He's a senior psychiatrist, but he's a veteran person who has been training adolescent health from last 15 years or so. Dr. Rajesh, sir, welcome and good evening. Can you say a few words and words of blessing? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It has been a pleasure, Dr. Pamde. We have been associated with the adolescent health for last almost 20 years. I joined in Safdarjung and we started that adolescent health. Now that is in another area, demystifying gender. Well, definitely this is an area in which if I say that we all are learning, we all are accommodating, we all are coping, then I'm not exaggerating the sentence, because definitely I am learning. We formed a committee in Safdarjung Hospital where when the sex gender cases started coming, and I was the chairperson for that committee, and it was really, we hardly had any Indian guidelines to go for an operations and other things, and we were relying more on the Western side. But seeing the 100+ attendance of this meeting and asking me to speak, it has been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure, and I'm seeing the things are growing and it will grow. Not taking much of the time because it is an inaugural one, and I see Dr. Kavita Arora, a distinguished psychiatrist. So we are going to learn from her. And thank you, Dr. Pamde. And indeed, I am grateful. In fact, the reason, Dr. Pamde, I am here is of my friend, Air Commodore Sanjay Sharma, who is a neighbor.
Okay.
So when he asked, I said, definitely, I'll be happy to part of it. And thank you indeed.
But you will have to contribute a lot in future, sir. So thank you very much, everyone, for this brief inaugural program. And it is 6:15, and I give this platform to Dr. Sharma, please.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's really such a pleasure to be speaking to such an elite audience. So I'm not going to waste time. We also have the icing on this cake, which will come right toward the end, where we have the LHMC alumni who is going to be speaking to us. And it is so apt that we are doing this program post Guru Purnima. So blessings from all the gurus that are here. I am going to now invite Tia, who is going to take us through this interesting journey where we are going to be learning. Tia, the stage is yours.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Tia. I'm the creative director of ATI, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, the introductory session of this webinar. As everybody's rightly said, it's quite a historic event. And let me quickly give you a rundown of your speakers. So to start with, we have Dr. Ren Massey, a senior member of WPATH and the co-chair of the GEI Mental Health at WPATH. We have Dr. Kavita, an alumnus of LHMC and the founder of Children First and a very established psychiatrist. We have Dr. Bittu Kaveri, an associate professor of biology and psychology at Ashoka and also a PhD in neuroscience. We have Dr. Shobhini Rajan, the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Health and who's been in the HIV/AIDS program at NACO. We have Amrita Sarkar ma'am, who has 2 decades of activism in the trans community under her belt. She has taken part in capacity building initiatives for members of the transgender community and is also the founding member of the IRGT. I think what we can all understand is we have a very fantastic cast of people here, and I don't think we could have chosen better representatives from their fields to lead an initiative like this. Now, without further ado, I'm just going to explain to everybody how this is going to go. We're going to have the speakers going one after another. And, I think without giving away too much, let's just start. Let's get into it. So the first speaker that we have is Dr. Ren Massey, who, like I said, has been quite a strong figure in the coming together of all of this. IPATH and ATI has looked toward WPATH for their practices. And, we have Dr. Ren Massey to tell us about exactly why WPATH and why GEI and what sort of learnings we can take as a country where this field is very young. How can we take these lessons from something as established as the GEI, as WPATH? So Dr. Ren, please take it away.
Thank you, Tia. And I want to thank Florencia and also IAP and ATI and WPATH for letting me be with you today. So WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, has been around for over 40 years. And it's the premier international multidisciplinary organization that studies and advocates for and provides education around transgender and gender diverse individuals' healthcare. And we also wrote the standards of care, the very first version in 1979. And we're now in version 7 and are updating. And by the end of the year, we expect to have version 8 of the standards of care out. The standards of care are what we teach from in our courses. We have foundations courses and we have advanced medical, mental health, child and adolescence, ethics, and other courses. And also the standards of care are very important because they are used around the world by insurance companies, governmental bodies, court systems, educational systems, including in the law in India a few years ago, granting rights to transgender individuals. So the standards of care that WPATH writes are very important as a global healthcare document.
Thank you so much. This thing, we do have the Indian Standards of Care, the ISOC one that had come out following sort of the arc from GEI and WPATH. Another question that, I suppose that I have for you, and I think we've touched on this before as well, is about the importance of the community actively participating in terms of these conversations, in terms of something that Dr. Harish said as well, nothing about us without us, So if you could just touch on that a little bit.
So this is a very exciting development. I was really happy to hear that phrase because we say that a lot here in the US, nothing about us without us. Transgender and gender diverse people are often experiencing negative encounters in healthcare settings. And so they avoid healthcare at times. Just last week, my associate in my practice had a person who was assigned female at birth. That's terminology we often use, assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth. And this AFAB person was hesitant to go in for healthcare. This person was very uncomfortable as they're working out their gender identity, very uncomfortable with having a uterus and ovaries, and so had not gotten taken care of in a long time and was having bleeding that was getting worse and worse. And then this person woke up, excuse me if this is very graphic, but very bloody and blood all over the place and very scared. And a lot of trans folks end up avoiding healthcare and then in emergency situations. So that's just one example of why we want trans folks involved in developing curriculum and in doing trainings. We also want people to have the opportunity to see the insights of exactly the experiences that trans folks can tell you about negative experiences they have in healthcare settings. A friend of mine who's a transgender man, for example, had an illness. It was probably food poisoning, but he had not had any genital surgery. And he's in the emergency room and was handed a handheld urinal. And he told the nurse, "I can't use this." And she's like, "Why not?" And he said, "Because I'm a transgender man and I've not had any surgery." And she then proceeded to give him a hard time and question him. What, really? And well, why would you want to change from being a woman? What's wrong with being a woman? And it just became this bizarre encounter that was not focused on his healthcare. And so we don't want y'all or the people who work with you, because even when you're trained, you're going to need to train and make sure the people who work with you and for you are advocates and sensitive to the healthcare needs of trans individuals. And then the last reason I'd say that we need to have representation of the trans community in these types of trainings is because we want people to know that trans individuals can be successful, productive, contributing members of society if they are given support and not discriminated against and are allowed to use their talents in the healthcare settings or other settings in which they function.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ren. I think just sort of using that as a jumping point, I wanted to pivot to our next speaker, Dr. Kavita. And, the things that you mentioned, you spoke about how much of an impact a trans person's mental health has on their journey, and why it is important for the healthcare providers to be cognizant of this. Now, somebody who actually quite literally wrote the chapter, this thing in the Indian Standards of Care on mental health is Dr. Kavita. And, that's just something that I wanted to kind of also point out, that we now have these standards of care that are coming out. It's very important that even medical professionals know this and know that there is groundwork that is being laid to work this into the curriculum. But, the thing, so just taking that as sort of like the jumping point toward mental health, I want to kind of like talk to Dr. Kavita about a little bit about what she wrote about like who owns gender, because I believe that was the crux of her chapter on the Indian Standards of Care. So Dr. Kavita, please.
Thank you, Tia. It's lovely to be questioned by you. I think it just gives me pride to sit here and sort of be here. And I think the other thing that I really want to mention is how I'm feeling, because this is by Curentia, which is by LHMC, and I'm an ex-alumnus. So it's like coming to home ground. And I think that's also what Curentia means, where you derive your strength from. So thank you for inviting me. And to the all-important question of who owns gender, I think when I wrote about it, it was more like a musing. It was more about also my understanding over the years. Gender was not a construct that we thought about in medical college. Nobody talked about gender as a construct in itself till you encounter someone who questions it. You don't actually start thinking about it. And I think that needs to change, and that's why we are all here. So to say two main points in this about who owns gender, I think every sentence that you start with saying, I am, is owned by you. I am a doctor, I am a sister, I am so-and-so, I am. So when I say I am a woman, that's mine. And it should be, ought to be, and is my choice. However, what is the actual process in our country or worldwide, how gender is actually seen or assigned? So the way that it is usually done is how gender is assigned at birth, for example. So when a child is born, the child doesn't have the sort of ability to say, I am boy or girl or this gender or that. So it is the adults around the child who have the responsibility of assigning the gender. Now, what do they have in terms of what gender should be assigned? The only thing they have is really the physical characteristics. So unless there is something going on that makes them go, as a medical professional, you're going to do more like genetic testing, etc., what you're going to, and what anyone is going to look at, is the physical external genitalia. And you assign gender. Now, this is not the concept of gender. This is assigning biological sex. However, many people that I meet seem to say gender and biological sex see it as synonymous, that once this is assigned, this is what the gender of the child is going to be. Now, we know that actually the word gender in the English language, otherwise, this is not the concept. It is not equal to biological sex. Once you know that, the second part of the process is, okay, right now, the child or the individual doesn't have yet the kind of identity that they would be able to articulate and claim their gender. So we are going to go with the evidence that the adults are doing. However, as the child is growing up, what's the process in which they arrive at, each one of us arrives at owning our gender? And here, I think it's very important for us to realize who is responsible here. Because oftentimes it's left to the person to take that accountability, to the individual to take that accountability. However, if you actually look at the process, as a child is growing up, they are usually told, there are stories around them, they're usually told you're a boy, you're a girl. They're dressed like that. Again, who's accountable for that? Mostly the adults around them. So here again, if the accountability and the responsibilities with the adults, if a child's growing up and hearing, I'm a boy, yeah, and seeing people around saying, boys do this, So two kinds of stories. Who you are is told to the child. The other is, what does this kind of a gender do? That's the other kind of story. Boys do this, they don't do that. Girls do this, they don't do that. Now, this is a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old for whom the adults around him are the heroes. They know best. And they are absorbing. The other thing that you have to understand about mental health and about each one of us is, if you actually look at and feel your own experiences, there is no way a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old knows how the other child is feeling about the same thing. Because felt experiences are not objective, they're subjective. So if you feel that mango is sweet, or if you feel or experience great joy in a song, you cannot for certainty say that somebody else is feeling and experiencing the same thing, because this is a felt experience. It's subjective, it's yours. Now, how will this child know that if this is how a boy feels, everybody else who's a boy is feeling like this? They don't. So they're taking your word as adults for granted and saying this is how a child must feel. The reason I'm explaining this progression is, oftentimes I find doctors, adults, parents sometimes saying, he never showed this to us earlier. Something about bad company or something about what they've watched on the net must have caused this. That's not true, because the way your identity is being formed is very complex. And a lot of it, the accountability is on the milieu outside, the stories and the prevalent social discourses and the stereotypes that we grew up in. And when it comes to taking accountability for it, this is the interface that this child will have to face and either oppose or conform to. And this is how slowly, as a child starts experiencing their own gender, they will arrive at, I do feel like this, everybody else who is like this maybe feels like this, I will own this gender. And then there are others who cannot own that gender because the felt experience is so different that they feel something is wrong. Now, if we had a social structure that said, you are not wrong, felt experiences cannot be untrue, we made a social structure that doesn't fit, then it would have been a very different world. Yeah, the dysphoria may have looked very different. The dysphoria may have been in the social structure of how we can accept each person. However, the accountability is laid square on the shoulders of the young person who's not being able to conform. So in our culture as well, this is a very lonesome experience for those who cannot identify or resonate with their internal felt experience of gender and what is being said ought to be in the. So this is how the sort of arriving at own gender. So who owns us and our identities in India? Because we live in joint families and we are very community driven most of the time. Most of our identities are co-owned. This is not true of just gender. It is also true of how fair are you, how your hair should look, how much you're eating and how you should look if you are eating this much, and what you should take as your career and what. So it's beautiful sometimes to be living in a community, but wherever you are not being able to conform, this also means that this can lead to a lot of distress and confrontation and conflict. So I think this part of who owns my identity entirely is very different in India. And it's a joy, but it can also prove to be extremely difficult for someone who's not being able to see. So this brings me to the third point of then, how does one express gender to the entire? So you express it to yourself, that's your internal journey. But how do you interface with the rest of the world when you integrate with them? And this is really not something that anybody ought to do according to anyone else. This is really something that is dependent on a variable number of factors, including temperament. And this is true for all kinds of expression of identity, not just gender. So you may be somebody who loves to dance, as simple as that. Some of you will be on the stage dancing whenever the music plays. And yet there will be some who will be sitting in the audience tapping their feet. Doesn't mean they don't love dancing. That doesn't mean they can't be dancers. This is their expression. And it's very different socially, non-socially. And you may be the absolute best dancer, but do not want to go on that particular stage. Similarly, for gender expression, there is no singular way to express your gender. And for us, anyone to believe that if you are a woman, you ought to look like this, I think that's a little bit of a unfair bit. So I think that's the other part I see very often that we get foxed by. We do not see the gender expression except in the stereotyped way that possibly we have grown up in. So I think I'm going to stop there with this question, Tia, and hand back over to you. But these are the three things that I really think are very important when we talk about who owns our gender.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kavita. That was beautifully put. I am going to be breaking our flow of conversation for a bit because I know that Dr. Ren is only here for a short while, and I have one last question for Dr. Ren. So, Dr. Ren, I want to know what is the importance of research-driven, leaps and bounds in this sort of a field? What is the importance of the creation of a holistic system? How does one reach to that level?
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to say a little bit more, Tia. And I just want to say I really appreciated Dr. Kavita's explanation. I thought that was so lovely and articulate and well put about the influences on children and development and their understanding of gender and the confusion. And, that's an area, for example, where we need a lot of research is on the development of gender identity. Most of the research has been done on the development of cisgender identity. And cisgender, for those, many of you probably know, but I'll just say for those who may not know, cisgender means that a person's gender identity that they experience, that they own, matches the legal marker that was assigned to them without their consent. And the majority of the population is cisgender. However, we need more research on understanding identity development on youth who are transgender or who are gender diverse, gender expansive, gender creative. And additionally, we need research understanding the adolescent experience as well as the adult experience. In terms of prevalence, the research indicates, at least in Western studies, that about 1% of youth are identifying as transgender, and about 2% are identifying as non-binary or questioning their gender identity in one form or another. Non-binary may not be as familiar a term. I don't know. I understand that there's a lot of development about different gender identities going on in India at this time. But if you think about 1% of the population of India, that's over 13 million people. That's a lot of people who are needing sensitive, informed healthcare around their gender identity, and then double that many who are non-binary gender questioning. Now, I will tell you that's from Western studies. However, WPATH faculty, we've done programs in other countries. I did one in Vietnam where I was training folks just before the pandemic in 2020. And we were finding similar statistics in Vietnam. So it's very important that we understand, first of all, the prevalence, and then the pathways of development, and then what interventions are going to be the most helpful. Because some people benefit tremendously just from hormones. Some people benefit the most from a social transition, meaning they're going to change their name, their haircut, perhaps, or their clothing, their presentation. Some people need surgeries. And then how do we get the best outcomes from those different interventions? So there's a lot of areas of research that we're needing. And again, I would say we want this to be research that is done, nothing about us without us. In fact, in the International Journal of Transgender Health, which is the publication officially of WPATH, that is a policy to try to have a trans or gender diverse person on every research paper that is accepted. I guess I would also like to add, as I may not get the opportunity to say a lot more, I know we're going to be moving on some, but you know, as a transgender man, I really appreciate the education that is going on here. I was raised a girl, and much like Dr. Kavita described, I kind of was like, oh, well, I guess everybody's telling me I'm a girl, so I'm supposed to do these things, but none of those things fit for me. And I just happen to be a more typical binary guy, but because of all those social, cultural, community things, it took me such a long time to discover it. I was I was in my 40s when I realized that I was transgender. And I thought I was just a lesbian. And I point that out just because a lot of families bring their kids to me thinking, can my kid just be gay? And I help them understand that being gay is very different. You know, I was in the lesbian community, but that didn't fit either exactly for me. And so I transitioned about a decade ago in my late 40s. And it's been a real privilege to be able to provide education, but also to be participating in research to help us understand how do we help people get in touch with their gender identities sooner. So this is a social change that we're talking about. And as physicians, future physicians, as mental health professionals, you are going to be leaders and thought leaders in your country who can shift the tide of thinking and destigmatize and depathologize gender identity. And so I applaud the leadership of our young folks, of the medical students, and I really praise the faculty and the IAP for listening to the leadership of the young people in bringing gender issues much more to the forefront. So.
Thank you so much, Dr. And that was wonderfully put. And, you know, taking that exact thing that you said as sort of like a jumping point, you spoke about the importance of thought leaders and the importance of destigmatizing the sort of pathology surrounding gender. I think somebody whose work in this field is pretty well known in terms of the work that the HIV AIDS Alliance has done, in terms of the work that NACO has done. These are one of those bodies that we look at for the formation of like a more holistic approach to delivery of transgender healthcare. Because as we keep repeating, 1% of the population of India is a large number. This is not some tiny statistic that is going to go away. And, I would just like Dr. Shobhini to sort of take center stage and talk to us about the importance of serving such a large population that has gone unserved, and how one can develop these sort of modules and ensure that the medical professionals of India are equipped to handle the wave of change that's on its way. So Dr. Shobhini, if you could please.
So thanks, Tia. And I'm really happy to be here, primarily because even I am a Hardonian, and it's great to be back here, though virtually. The other thing I'd like to say is that I'm out of town and in rural Maharashtra, so forgive me if there are audio disturbances. Now, the question that you asked was, how does the work that NACO does kind of figure with gender-friendly healthcare? So, since I represent NACO, NACO is a division of the Ministry of Health and is responsible for the country's AIDS response. Now, in the AIDS response, considering the sexual transmission of HIV, there have always been targeted interventions around populations that we, name as high-risk groups or HRGs. Now, high-risk groups traditionally that we worked with include female sex workers, men having sex with men, injecting drug users, and transgendered communities. And of course, we do understand that some of these high-risk groups that we call
could be part of the larger population of LGBTQIA+. But in the HIV program, we continue to use the terminology of key populations or high-risk group individuals. Now, the HIV prevalence among the transgender or Hijra population in India is as high as 3.14%, as against a general population prevalence of 0.22. And this is much higher, and which is why we kind of have been working. Now, the modality of how NACO works with populations is through community-led and community-centric approaches. So, as against many other health programs, the program of HIV always has a very, let us say, strong connect and engagement with community. And to a large extent, even the community reaches out to NACO for needs beyond their HIV/AIDS needs, so to say. So, like in the HIV/AIDS spectrum, we provide services like access to condom or access to knowledge and information about HIV prevention, about accessing an HIV test or access antiretroviral treatment if a person were to be found positive. But people do reach out to us to link them to hormone therapies or for gender reassignment, or what is now known more as gender affirmative procedures and surgeries. So because of this, there are actually two instances why NACO got kind of pulled into activities beyond their total mandate. One is that there was a very strong interest under the Niti Aayog. They created a subgroup for LGBTQIA and asked various ministries to look into holistic needs. So not just health needs, but holistic needs. And there were responses and meetings to be attended. And in the ministry, the matter traveled all across. It went to perhaps the medical education, it went to hospital division, and then it came to NACO because nobody else in the ministry seemed to know how to engage with communities. So, and similarly, there was the National Human Rights Commission had also conducted a conference. And as part of that conference, they had also indicated many asks of different ministries. So the asks from Ministry of Health were again marked down to NACO. And I'll just like to tell the group about the three major asks, which are probably one of the reasons and a kind of background behind this kind of interest getting generated, not only across the medical profession, but also across young professionals like Querencia and even other community support groups as well. One is that there is a definite need for strengthening medical education in this area. So be it about, transgender person might come to a hospital for just a stomach ache, but the way he's treated, the way he's talked to, and the way he's even addressed to, knowing about what people's preferred pronouns are, those are things that medical school does not teach. So we need to have this medical education part really ramped up. And I'm happy that we have representation from Indian Academy of Pediatrics and many senior stalwarts who will be able to make that much needed change in undergraduate and postgraduate curricula. The second thing is services. So services for gender affirmation are far and in between. They are available in niche settings for which a person really needs to know where he wants to go to get what he needs. And the fact that it is a need and it is not something like cosmetic surgery or something like, some kind of plastic surgery that a person wants just to beautify himself, it is actually to express his identity. And that clarity needs to be worked out. And perhaps the idea that Athi had about setting up centers of excellence in which we are trying to, we have written to All India Institute of Medical Sciences to open such a gender affirmative clinic. And the third most important thing is that we start having a sort of inclusive atmosphere free of stigma and discrimination across board. So this will mean sensitizing a huge array of healthcare, not only doctors, but healthcare workers in how to talk to people. Like there are people who come to us and say, but why is there not a toilet for me in a hospital, or why is there not a queue where I can stand? I don't want to stand in the women's queue or the men's queue, so where do I stand? So these kind of things, and even the clarity, the clarity between what is gender identity and what is sexual orientation. There is even that gingerbread man is not either taught, and it is not something that is understood in the medical profession per se. So by being in NACO, we kind of get inducted into it because of the community engagement, but it requires mainstreaming, and it requires to be all there. So I think, Thea, I hope I kind of tried to answer what you had asked. So while it may begin with the HIV program, we can't expect to confine it there, and it has to be owned by many more people to move further. So that's
No,
it from
ma'am,
me. Over.
Actually really like how you mentioned that NACO sort of like accidentally got dragged into this, because it is true. This is seeing how disparate the sort of like community the community engagement with the government is. That's how sort of like spread out it is. And I think one thing that we've all learned is that like it's very important to have this adjusted medical curriculum. And Dr. Rana, before you leave, I do want to know your perspective on sort of I'm absolutely grilling Dr. Ren for everybody watching, but no, because we do want to know, so you have a general idea of how sort of in India, the trans community is already trying to bridge that gap, and the medical fraternity has now come together with initiatives like this. How do we, barring webinars such as this, how do we get these kids the education that they want? How do we make sure that the conversations surrounding gender are injected into the medical curriculum? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, you're throwing me a softball there, aren't you? So now these are very important questions you're asking, Taya. And I think that we need multi-pronged approaches to education around these issues. I actually think the sooner we can start, if we can start in, primary schools when people are, just wee ones growing up, and with their parents, as well as in middle schools, high schools, and then definitely in the college and graduate programs. We do need, the webinars are very useful. I think having in-person trainings can be very helpful. Sometimes when I do trainings, I will do exercises to give people a little bit of a flavor of the experience of what it's like to go to try to fill out forms and there's not a blank on the form that fits your gender identity, for example, or the experience of like yesterday. So my sister has a cardiac condition, and so my doctor referred me to get a cardiac CT scan. And so I'm going to get the CT scan, and as the technician is going to put the nodes on my chest to measure me as I go through the monitor and the machine, she looks at my scars and she says, "Oh, what happened here?" And I just said, "Well, I had surgery." And she said, "Oh, that must have been pretty big. Was it a car accident or what?" And I'm like, do I feel like making this an educational moment? I was really wanting to focus on my own healthcare. But I told her, and then fortunately she was supportive, but then it was like, no, you're not transgender. Like, yes. Are you kidding me? I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. My gender identity is not a joke to me. And it was a very bizarre experience. And so helping healthcare professionals have some understanding of this. Again, that's a benefit of having people who've been through these experiences to tell you it doesn't feel good, and to develop written curriculum as well as in live programs, webinar programs, hitting the organizations, the professional associations like IAP, which is fantastic that they're involved. And I love the structure that y'all have proposed about starting with centers of excellence and then moving out from there. There's so much work to be done, and I'm just thrilled that all of y'all are involved and excited about it. And again, as Dr. Shavani said, I'll finish with this, be aware that it is across all the areas of health, because it's not just people who are going to work with people helping them transition or explore gender. People have heart conditions, people have GI conditions, people have dermatological conditions or cancers, etc. And so people need help across all sorts of health in the emergency room and more. So we want y'all to be all sensitive to these issues, and I appreciate your listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ren, for taking out the time to be here with us today. It was really invaluable. Your inputs were like absolutely, I do like the idea of like healthcare professionals needing to know, and like for the even the process of like something as simple as a regular healthcare checkup should not be an educational moment. And thank you so much for sort of bringing that point up. Once again, I on behalf of everybody present here, Querencia, LHMC, Ati especially, I would like to thank you so much for sparing the time and being here with us today. And since
thank you for having me. I have to go now. Thank you, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye. But speaking of educational moments, and this is a great segue that I just came up with on the spot. But for somebody who saying every day would be an educational moment, would be a professor, the associate professor actually at Ashoka University. We have with us Dr. Bittu, and they are a PhD in neuroscience, and as I mentioned, we have really like just titans of their industry over here. And from Dr. Bittu, what I really do want to know is, what is the importance of establishing that education of being in those classrooms and talking to kids who might go on to be future psychologists, who might be future mental health professionals? What has that experience been like for you? So if you could just let us know.
All right. So I'm in classrooms with both psychology students and biology students. Of course, in India, biology students don't usually go on to become medical professionals because they're doing MBBS at undergraduate levels. So I guess I have a chance to at least talk to some medical students here today. But of course, lots of people in my classroom go on to be psychologists. I sort of largely teach neuroscience. So I try to explain to students how the brain works in general, and therefore how an understanding of gender emerges from the brain. A lot of medical professionals also sometimes forget, that the brain is a biological organ, right? It's part of the body, often the phenomenon of being trans is relegated to the realm of or people say this is something, a psychological issue here, right? As in, they seem to think that something which is psychological sort of have mein hai, right? That it's something that's sort of in the air, and don't realize that it emerges from a biological organ, which is not very different from other biological organs in the body. So when I teach, I try to, among other things, explain how brains produce behavior. And therefore, if you identify as a cisgender person who identifies in some sense or doesn't strongly not identify with the gender assigned at birth, that behavior emerges from the ways in which your brain has been shaped developmentally and the ways in which it interacts with the structure of gender in the world. And if you're a trans person who does not identify with the gender you were assigned at birth, likewise, that behavior emerges from the development of your brain and it's the interaction of you with your brain and with the environment. Therefore, if there is, one of the things that we're still getting a handle on is sort of what the exact neural correlates of trans identity may be. But I don't think one needs to wait for that to happen in order to recognize that if all behavior is produced by neural activity, then if there is a behavior, there is a neural basis to that behavior. And in some sense, the evidence of the neural basis of that behavior should not be necessary for people to understand that there is therefore a scientific basis to gender identity. Now, the question, of course, is we think of biological sex as, relating to the body, but also relating to the brain, right? So we have a sense of the ways in which brains are shaped by or influenced by biological sex. Not hugely, surprisingly. Actually, if you look at male brains and female brains as they're biologically classed, one actually finds fewer differences than one might expect. But to the extent that one finds any differences, the question really is how much of what we think of as gender is socially constructed, and how much of it emerges from, say, genes. And that's also a difficult question to answer. So it's another example of a question that we're not at a stage where we can answer in the field. We can't answer in the field not because we don't have the tools, but because as long as there is a social construct of gender, since brains are an example of an organ, unlike some others where sort of every interaction with the world, every memorable interaction takes the form of neural remodeling, right? So of changes in the ways in which neurons connect with each other in the brain. So the hardware of the brain changes with social interaction. And therefore social structures such as gender and several other social structures, caste, class, and so on, become encoded in brains, right? They shape and influence brains. And therefore, as long as you have a social construct around gender, you are going to have neural correlates of those social structures. And it's going to be very hard to tell what behavior that is gendered in any way, right? What is even conventionally cisgendered, how that relates to the social construct of gender versus biological bodies. And remember, when I say the social construct of gender, which is not a term that's generally familiar to doctors and not taught, even though it must be taught, because as neuroscientists, we understand that if the brain is constantly remodeling in response to interaction, which includes social interaction, then it becomes very difficult to understand the functioning of the brain if one is thinking, in the absence of understanding social structures. So what does it mean then for gender to be a social construct? One means that we all have bodies. We go to extraordinary lengths to cover up our bodies when we're around each other. And yet you have a social system in which before I even refer to you or give you a pronoun, I have to think what your body looks like. And uske aadhar pe, I'm going to refer to you as he or she, which sounds like an extremely disrespectful thing to do in the first place, which is why, pronouns are so difficult. For a trans person, as a trans person, I can explain what that experience is like. Not all trans people experience this, but I experience what's called dysphoria, which is is a disconnect. So I experience physical dysphoria, which is a physical disconnect from at least secondary sexual characteristics in my body. And if you, again, a lot of people who aren't trans will find this very difficult to understand. So I'll try and use a tool to convey what this is like. So if you close your eyes and you raise your hand, right, even if you can't see your hand, you have a mental map of where your arm is, right? You have a sense of where your body is, right? Even if you're not looking at it. And that's because your brain generates an expectation of your body from years of sort of sensory input. So, with your arms raised, then, the nerves that are adjacent to your own muscles are sending feedback to the brain. But that feedback in some sense makes sense to the brain, or is interpreted by the brain based on pre-existing biases in how brains interpret sensory touch information. And of course, there's touch information, there's visual information, there's multi-sensory information about your body. Now, imagine you wake up tomorrow and you have this whole body where you have a sense that I have two arms, and you wake up tomorrow with an extra arm, right? Now, you can think of this in two ways. Either you wake up with an extra arm from which you're not getting any physical input, right? So it's there on your body, but you're not feeling it. And it feels very strange to have something on your body that you're not expecting. Or you have an arm that is giving you input, but you've spent your entire life as a person with two arms. And so you're not, like the sensory input from the third arm is just, it's just a constant distractor, right? So you're trying not to think about it, but it's unexpected sensory input. So any unexpected sensory input makes its way into your sort of attentional circuitry, into your conscious perception of the world. And so you would like to not spend the entire day thinking about your extra arm. It's really not interesting or relevant, right, to your day-to-day life. But there it is giving you unexpected sensory signals, right, all day. And that in some sense gives you a sense of what physical dysphoria is like, right? So I, for example, expect as a trans man, which describes the ways in which I relate to my body, that I have a flat chest, right? When I get sensory input that contradicts that, right, it's just jarring, it's disturbing, it's surprising, right? It's like somebody suddenly turning on loud stereo multiple times a day. It forces its way into my attentional space, even though I don't want it to. So it's hard enough sort of being in a room by oneself. But if one goes outside that room and one interacts with people, including doctors, and doctors are then looking at your body up and down to try and decide what you are and what they should do with you, then that's just going to make your dysphoria worse, right? And of course, it's hard enough interacting with people in general, one can try and cover up, but when one goes to a doctor, there's no covering up, right? You're taking your body to them. And often doctors also have a sense of entitlement around trans persons' bodies, which is very invasive. And, people think, I'm a doctor, so, you've come to me because you have a stomachache, but I can still figure out what the rest of your body looks like, right? So that invasive kind of, the combination of those things makes almost every trans person I know really unwilling to see a doctor, right? You get a UTI, you're drinking gallons of water before you're like, okay, it's so bad that I absolutely have to go to a doctor, right? You have kidney stones, you just wait until you absolutely can't bear the pain before you go to a doctor. So the simple thing that I would say as a doctor is to perhaps understand how this experience is for a trans person. When any person comes into the hospital, ask them what name and pronouns they're comfortable with and treat them in that way. And if you need to then really only ask, it's very important to ask for consent before examining any part of anyone's body, I think, even as a doctor, even though that kind of medical ethics is very rarely taught. Make sure you're not sort of violating somebody's, just because they've come to a doctor doesn't mean that they're giving you license to kind of say, oh, I would like to see what kind of genitals you have or whatever else. And I've had any number of trans friends who've gone to the doctor, just be stripped by doctors. Other doctors are called in to view the show. This is the kind of thing that's happened with several trans friends of mine. And then it becomes very, very difficult to convince them to go to the doctor even when they really need it. So ask for consent when ask whether people are comfortable. I've been to I've taken people to a few trans-friendly doctors who are really good with this. Right, they're sensitive to the fact that it's difficult to live with a body as a trans person, and even harder to go to a doctor with such a body. And of course, remember that trans people have both medical needs which are trans-related and medical needs which are not trans-related. If there are medical needs which are trans-related, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with a lot of these, but I'm happy to provide, at some point, if that's deemed appropriate in the flow of this conversation, more information about what kinds of medical needs trans people, gender-affirming specifically medical needs trans people may come to you with. I would also strongly suggest that one not think of it as treatment, right? Because it's not as if one is in some sense sick and needing treatment. And to really just think of this as gender-affirming procedures. Yeah, I'll stop there because I know I've taken a lot of time, but I'm hoping that's helpful.
No, sir, thank you so much for that, because I think that was one of the most compelling descriptions of dysphoria I have ever sort of heard. And it really does make everything make a lot of sense. And that is sort of why we are gathered here, to understand how, your neurology plays a part into your very own perception. And that's something that a lot of trans people do struggle with. And I mean, we will be coming back to you for that, more procedures that trans folk do need in terms of affirmative healthcare. And one thing that we also like to say around here is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to formulate systems of care for people, not patients. And that's the sort of language that we want the general healthcare fraternity to also look at. I just thought of another segue from a professor to a student, because we do have a fourth year student. We have Ishika here with us. And, I really cannot overstate the importance of groups like Querencia, of collectives that have actually taken the initiative to rectify any sort of gaps in their own, curriculum. And I'm not even going to say anything more. I really want Ishika to just sort of launch into what she has to say, because the perspective of a student and a future professional, I think, would be invaluable to everybody. So Ishika, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I I feel like all of the speakers which have, they've covered so many important aspects, and the descriptions of gender dysphoria that we've heard today. I think all of the students here are really, they have some great clarity now on so many aspects, which, like mentioned, are not taught to us in medical curriculum. And obviously, if we are not taught about it, then it makes it even harder to get it into practice, despite all of the individual efforts that we might make. So what I want to mention here is that all the young medical professionals who are here or otherwise, they are absolutely eager to learn, to understand everything about gender, identity, expression. But the first thing we're taught in clinical exposure is history taking. And the first thing we say is demographic details. And one of the things we have to take is gender. And with we are actually not equipped till now. What we have been doing, we look at the person and we just assume their gender and write it down in our notebooks. However, it's this sort of conversation, since it's never happened before, and that's why we are not actually sensitive enough to go ahead and ask them for their pronouns and the gender that they identify with or want to express as. So I think this is the first point as a medical student where we just get stuck at if we are aware about the web of gender. So I want to move on to talk about the medical curriculum. Like it was mentioned by Dr. Ren Messi, that we have so much to learn, and it's not just trans related procedures or interventions that have to come in. I apologize for any mistake that I might have made, since I'm also trying my best to get into this. But there are something as common as, say, UTI or diarrhea, like mentioned by Dr. Bittu, can actually make a student feel that, okay, I'm not sure how to proceed with this if I'm not sure how to address the person and ask them about their symptoms. So this actually is, we actually hoped that with the competency-based medical curriculum, which came in 2018, there would be significant changes. They incorporated, ethics, medical ethics into it. But this is an essential component without which we will not be able to call ourselves gender inclusive healthcare providers, or ultimately not make an inclusive society. For all of this learning, it's very essential that we have dynamic role models who guide us, who we look up to, because without actually seeing it in practical life, it will make us very difficult for us to implement it ourselves when we actually go out as doctors. And the cherry on top is that our medical curriculum still focuses on it still considers gender dysphoria as a disease, as a disorder, which it is not, which we've discussed at length here. So I think in the chat box as well, it's mentioned how psychiatry as a subject is not is still teaching students how gender identity disorder is one of the disorders, behavioral disorders, which exists. At the same time, we talked about pediatrics, how from the beginning itself, it's important for the child, for the parents as well as the child, to be given the freedom to understand and choose the gender that they wish to express. But as a child, we just the pediatrician just speaks of ambiguous genitalia or speaks of precocious puberty, but we don't go ahead and explain to the parents in detail that there is a possible, the child may not affirm to this gender. Therefore, we have to let them decide on their own as they grow up. And I think this is one of the most important aspects. At the same time, I'm sure all the medical students here know about forensic medicine and how it talks about sodomy, lesbianism, as sexual offenses, transvestism as sexual perversion. And this obviously needs to be changed. This, after all that we've gone through, after all that's been done on the legal and social aspect, we need to incorporate it into the education system, like mentioned, from the primary education to professional courses. So I think this is one of the major aspects related to medical education, and as a medical student, that I feel most of us agree with, and yes, that is from my side.
Thank you so much, Ishika. No, that is invaluable input.
Yeah, can I ask one question to Ishika?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so we are taking Q&A at the end of this.
It is very much related to it.
Oh, no, then absolutely, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Ishika, you spoke very well, but what do you expect from your teachers about this subject?
So like this, thank you for that question. I first of all I want to express my gratitude to all of the professors and the faculty who've joined in for this webinar and who are willing to learn along with us. And I think that is the first step that we're looking at from our teachers, because if I talk about in terms of say pediatrics, our teachers teach us about breastfeeding, for example. And since they have so much experience with it, since they've studied it extensively, they are able to give us the best inputs, both theoretically as well as practically. But and I think the same principle applies here. If our teachers, our professors are aware about this in theory as well as in practice, then they would obviously be able to help us and help us navigate through this world, and as a doctor as well as an individual, because definitely what we learn from our teachers, our guides, is what we implement in our lives. So I think that is one of the biggest things we expect from our professors.
I think I actually do want to thank Dr. Harish for bringing this up, because that was going to be the next sort of volley anyway about, understanding and setting those expectations, and having those expectations from your professors, from your mentors. It's really important. And now I want to move on to our last but not the least, the most, in my opinion, like a really key figure in these conversations. We have Ms. Amrita coming up, and Ms. Amrita Sarkar, as I already mentioned, has had 2 decades of activism under her belt, right? And is working as the advisor for transgender wellbeing and advocacy at Alliance India. And ma'am, from you, specifically, I want to know 2 things, and I think these are very loaded questions, of course. But first, I want you to explain to sort of everybody here about a little bit about the Trans Act and about how these legislations have, affected like the trans community. And in saying that, what has your experience been of working with community-based organizations for all of these years? Where do you think, like as a representative of the community, can this conversation be taken forward?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tia. And I would like to thank the organizers and all the doctors, the dignitaries here. Thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about. And I'm really feeling very happy to see that kind of enthusiasm among all the students that they want to learn about it. So even before going to the question, it's there's an incident coming in my mind. I was taking a session 2 or 3 years back in Vilda with the Niketan. So the students, like almost there are like 300 and 400 students. They were telling me that, ma'am, we don't know people like you. And that is the problem. That since we don't know people like you, we are confused. And that's, bring the question whether I will address as a he, whether I will address as a she, or maybe they are just can be objectified to, make fun and all. So this is the gap. This is the gap. I think the main part is that yes, gender sexuality curriculum is very much important, and that should be introduced at a primary level of education. And then coming to this field of medical practice, I think yes, the all the dignitaries here are well experienced. So I mean definitely, and also from as an outcome of this session, the students will be more interested to know, so like people that who are these transgender people like actually. And the problem is actually the uh, how to say that, like adolescent part, when I'm actually moving from my childhood to my young age. Who am I? Whether I should behave like a girl, whether I should behave like a boy. And somebody is like from my family, or someone from my school, from my relatives, neighbor, everyone is not happy. So those experiences, I think most of the times people, I mean, including me. So that phase we have to, face in our life. And it is very much important to raise ourselves, like to why I am this, and yes, I am this. So that confidence we have to have. And I deal with some cases also. So uh, recently I was, talking with a trans individual. She is very young and she wanted to change her
Ma'am,
gender.
I think there's an issue with your
So,
audio. You're a little,
okay,
there's a
okay.
little.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Okay,
Sorry, I'm so
great.
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. So, okay. So I'll not waste time. So the just after this case actually, so she was very much confused. She was not very sure. She was asking me that should I change in my legal identity? Do I need to go for the gender affirmation surgery and all? I like a boy. I want to have like family with him, and this is the reality, that why we feel that I have a woman inside, why we feel that I have a man inside. So that gender role is very very much important. This is I mean for all of us, not only for the transgender people but also for the cisgender people as well. And coming to that, so I think this is an area I took the opportunity to talk about, since there are so many students, so they will be able to like learn more, to take interest more, yes, how to deal with such cases actually. Yeah. So talking about the trans act, yes, I think Dr. Shobini is here. So we had opportunity to work together, and I'm very very much lucky to work with Shobini ma'am. Since recently we organized country's first national transgender summit, and the transgender act was one of the key component. So the part is that I would like to take you back little bit earlier when 2014 the NALSA judgment was passed, and that was a very happiest moment for us, because it was telling like that not only the transgender people will be given identity as a third gender, but they will be also given binary identity, and that was without medical intervention. That was very very much important and happening for us. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't know why that the it moved. I mean, it did not move on, and that this transgender bill got introduced. Then this transgender act. Now we have transgender rules. So yes, it is a better shape now. I mean, the definition part was not very clear. I mean, the transgender person was very similar to some like bisexual person, but now they have a very great uh, definition. There are areas to talk about, like in inclusive services, but still, I mean, if I talk about the act overall, I mean, still there are some problem. I mean, yes, I'm fortunate that before this act was in picture, I got my medical and legal transition done. But now, as a trans person, one has to go, as you know, to the district magistrate first to get the transgender certificate. And if I want to have a binary gender, then again I have to, give the all my medical documents and all. And the second part is that I am very, very, very much unhappy because of the legal part. Legal part means I think all of you know that if a transgender person getting abused, the perpetrator can get punishment in between 6 months and 2 years only. But for the cisgender woman, it is at least for 7 years. This is one part. It doesn't talk about our marriage act, our adoption law, rape law. So there are still certain areas. I mean, but yet it is a good start, and I'm happy that uh, we are able to work with the National Transgender Council. We are able to work with NACO, most importantly, because all of you, most of you have said that the movement has started from the HIV/AIDS intervention program, and now I'm very very much happy that Dr. Shobini is very very much interested to take this effort forward, because she admitted, and along with all her colleagues, that gender affirmation care is very very much important. That should be integrated with HIV/AIDS services. Otherwise, it has got no use. So yes, trans gender act. I'm hoping that maybe after some time we will have a greater picture when we can see that all services are integrated together. That is the problem. There are organizations, they are doing so many things, but we don't know. For example, in a rural area, how a transgender person is taking the trouble. And that can be done when the health system, education system, legal system, everybody will come together. So some kind of a mechanism we have to build. So that is my, long dream actually. And coming to your next question, you are talking about the experience. Yes, experience is so long. Almost 20 years. But yes, at that point of time, we did not have much organizations working for the community. We did not have that much of legal options, and that point of time, like we were very much confused. For example, if one has to change her name, if one has to change the ge- gender and all, where I have to go. But these things are coming out now. This is a good part of it, that the health department, the trans act, the organization, the medical institution, so they are coming now together. So I think this is the best part. But yes, we also have to address our core needs. Education is the pillar of everything. So whenever I talk, any opportunity to speak, everywhere I talk about giving importance to the education system. It should be very much inclusive. Still now you can see on your own, so many students are getting drop out. And if we are dropping out from the education, how we can contribute to our community, how we can contribute to the larger society. So that part, then uh, definitely the legal aspect of it. So the trans tax. So I think there should be more resources. That yes, HIV/AIDS is definitely an integral issue for us, but apart from that, there are other core areas also, in terms of education, in terms of livelihood. Those things also needs to be uh, think upon. And I think that's a way, if we can something integrate all these areas, if we can integrate all these ser- services with a community friendly approach, with an inclusive approach, definitely we can see a better tomorrow. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much, ma'am. And I'd just like to address everybody watching right now before we move on to closing remarks. Like, the whole goal of this introductory webinar is to give you all an idea of how complicated this issue can be, and where to go from here. And in that vein of thought, I would like to invite both Dr. Bittu and Dr. Kavita to give like a few closing remarks each, because I think from the perspective of an educator and from the perspective of like a mental health professional, two people who are quite integral, just as Amrita ma'am just said, that education is a key factor in like a trans individual's journey, and mental health, as we've seen, is also another very like important thing. So I think if you could start with Dr. Bittu and then move on to Dr. Kavita.
Okay. Yeah. So, maybe I'll focus a little bit quickly on medical and biological curricula. I still remember, so I did my PhD at Harvard, and I still remember my conversation with the professor who taught me developmental biology. And, I was talking about some papers I was reading about intersex variations. And he said, what are intersex variations? It's a developmental biologist, right? Because this is 2 decades ago, or more. I'm dating myself, maybe a decade and a half ago. But but yeah, it's not uncommon to find doctors, biologists, and so on who are just simply unaware. And part of the reason is that, as I think it was Ishika who said that, there's sort of this little paragraph on kind of deviations, right, in which everything trans, queer, intersex is buried in medical curricula. And the understanding that that emerges even from those texts is highly pathological, and so people don't even relate it to actually what might be the what might be the reality for a trans or an intersex person on a daily level. For example, one of the things that that these textbooks suggest is that there's some way to sort of figure out what intersex variation an intersex person has, and that you'll just kind of automatically know what gender they might identify with. In fact, a lot of medical texts assume that, and a lot of doctors, assign not just genders to intersex babies, binary genders, but also assign or recommend the performing of invasive surgeries. Sometimes this is not even informed by a sense of how somebody might identify. It's just sort of, it's easier to cut than to add. So just sort of take intersex infants and just, remove external genitalia, which can be, extremely scarring and painful for life. And there is really no education in medical textbooks about how this practice should not be, recommended. And so that's an example of something that's missing in medical curricula and that needs to urgently be added in medical curricula. Then, again, when it comes to trans people, there's next to nothing, in terms of medical curricula. As I said, as Ishika correctly said, this is sort of just pointed out as some sort of deviation, briefly, but biologists as well are largely not in their biology curricula, and medical students are not in their medical curricula, gaining an understanding of how it is that biological sex, let alone gender identity and so on, are shaped in the body, right? And so there's very little sense of how, developmentally speaking, various genes may interact with each other, interact with the environment, and so on. In my particular case, it's also interesting because I know that when I have a sense of the ways in which medical intervention may have played a role in my own trans identity when it comes to prescribed treatments for pregnant women. And there's some initial research sort of looking at some of these interactions. It's still in its infancy, which is why I'm not talking about it in more detail. But I do think that the understanding in the medical I hesitate to use the word fraternity because it suggests a group of men, but we could also just call it what it is. But in the medical community, an understanding of the ways in which various medically standardly prescribed, sort of treatments or courses of action may impact somebody are not very well understood. In the specific case of someone being trans or queer or anything else, it's really vital for medical curricula themselves to suggest that, therefore, you can have somebody come to a hospital. I mean, there's no preparation that a doctor has for the fact that, say, someone like me, that a man can come to a hospital with gynecological problems, right? So every time I go to a gynecologist, it's excruciating being in the waiting room because, people are just saying, you're in the wrong room, you're in the wrong department. And I just have to say, don't, focus on yourselves. Don't worry about where I am correctly or incorrectly placed. A lot of the discourse, it's difficult to buy, stuff that one needs for one's gynecological needs. It's difficult to find trans-friendly gynecologists. It's difficult to find doctors in general who are trans-friendly. I'm, for example, one of the few actually the only trans person I know in the country who's also tried to get pregnant. And the confusion among doctors is just immense, right? It's, well, first of all, why would you want to have a child if you are a trans man? So just sort of I would say, like, even among a very large number of people, there's this very sort of a crude understanding that a trans man, would not want to, why would one want to carry a child, right? Why is that something that one might want to do? And I've always said, look, if I was born a cis man, I'd still want to do it, right? I just feel, that it's unfortunately an option that I don't have. So if it's an option that I do have, I'm quite happy to do this. And you can sort of see my locket, which is a seahorse. Right, since seahorse males, carry their young and give, life birth to them. So that, for example, was an interesting experience. It's sort of an entire experience where, I'm like the only guy in a room full of women, and over and over again, and it's assumed that I'm there for someone else, and so I would say that it's just important for there to be training across the board in hospitals. But also for people then in medical curricula to get this information about what it is that they should expect in hospitals when trans patients come in. And a lot of there's still a very strong conflation of biological sex and gender identity, and so people think that a trans person who comes into a hospital I mean, even now, I think of the first, in several government medical institutions, when we've gone to just get gender affirmation, like mental health certificates or GID certificates for trans persons, gender identity dysphoria certificates for trans persons, they've been told first go to the gynec section and get yourself checked out, then wo report leke aana before you get a certificate of gender identity dysphoria, which has nothing to do with your body, right? And then often they're asked to strip when they go to those doctors. So these are the kinds of procedures which, I mean, I don't even know where that procedure comes from, right? Is it in a rule book? Is it just people, winging it? I've seen it happen in so many places that I'm starting to feel that there is a government hospital rule book that says if someone comes to you with this, send them to gynecology first or something. So there are various steps at which this needs to be remedied, but of course it has to begin with medical curricula. It has to begin with medical students being equipped to be good, empathetic doctors for trans persons. But if you've not had such a medical curriculum, I would say just ask trans people who come into you. I mean, I mean, we're not thrilled about having to be everybody's trans educational experience, I think, as Dr. Ren said. But I think that when we go to the doctor, we much rather educate them on what we need than have impositional healthcare. So, so just ask.
That was, thank you so much for that, sir. I am, incidentally, we are running a wee bit over time, and there are some excellent questions from chat that I do want to get to. So just for that, Dr. Kavita will be having you on shortly after a tiny video message from Dr. Sanjeev, who is the past president of the IAP and executive board member candidate for this year's national IAP. And after that, we'll be watching a tiny little role play that the kids at Querentia have put together. And once that's done, we will be back with the hard-hitting questions for our panel members. So I think if you could just roll that video to start things off.
Hello friends, I am Dr. Sanjeev Kumar. I am a pediatrician. I have been the president of UP State Indian Academy of Pediatrics. At the outset, let me first congratulate ATHI Athi, WPATH and WHO Collaborating Center for Adolescent Health, Department of Pediatrics, Lady Hardinge Medical College for organizing such an important need of the hour program. As we know that gender identity is the person's innermost concept of self as male, female, a blend of both or neither. One's gender identity may be the same or different from their sex assigned at birth. When the child's self-affirmed identity does not match with the assigned sex, gender incongruence occurs, which leads to distress and dysphoria when we as a family and society do not agree with the narrative of the child. The problem is that we equate gender with sex and we consider gender incongruence a disease or psychiatric disorder, while the reality is that it is a part of natural spectrum of human diversity, not a mental disorder. So, we the pediatricians have a major role to play. We have to recognize it early and understand that it is a fluid state and part of psychosocial and sexual development. We need to have a gender affirming participative approach. Our most important role is to prevent the child from going into the closet and develop gender dysphoria. We need to facilitate social transition as early as possible and need to refer properly and timely for hormonal and or surgical therapy. Thank you.
Right. So after that wonderful video message, I'm going to hand it over to the team from Querentia to take it away with the role play that they have put together for us all.
Lady Hardinge Medical College. We now have a short interactive session which we will be showing you two situations of routine healthcare scenarios, where it is important to provide gender-friendly healthcare.
हाँ जी, आप ये फॉर्म फिल कीजिए और इंतज़ार करिए, जब आपकी बारी आएगी तो आपको बुला लिया जाएगा। हाँ जी, बैठ। अरे आपने जेंडर का कॉलम ब्लैंक क्यों छोड़ दिया? कोई बात नहीं, अब मैं भर देती हूँ।
So now that all of you have seen the play, one of my teammates will be showing you some form options, and you will have to pick one or more of them according to what you think is the most appropriate. So you'll have to put the number of the form in the chat box. Which one do you think is the most gender friendly and appropriate form column? Okay, so I see, I saw 2, then I'm seeing many 4s. Okay, so would any of you like to unmute and explain your choice? Please feel free to raise your hand. There's 3 also coming. So would any of you like to unmute and explain your choice?
I mean, if any of the panelists could also jump in on this, I would just like to.
Anybody, please, anybody from the team or the panelists or the students?
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yes, so I can see that third and fourth absolutely fine. So this where you are talking about name, preferred name, sex, assigned and birth, current gender, preferred pronouns. At least current / preferred gender will be fine, because sometimes even community people, we get confused that what is my current gender? Am I a still male? Am I a still female? Or the way I want to be, that is my preferred gender role, that is my preferred gender identity. So instead of only saying current gender, if you say preferred gender, that will give more space actually. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can
That's
I
a
ask
great.
one question? Can I ask one question to everyone? At what age we can ask this question? The preferred gender, or what preferred name, preferred pronouns. So at what minimum age we can ask this question?
Well, I can say that some trans persons know at a very early age. So some trans persons can know that, or at least have this sense of themselves as and their gender identity as departing from the gender assigned at birth as early as the age of 3. For some people, it's not that early. For some people, it's the age of 14, 15. There's another sort of spike in how many in the time at which people sort of think of themselves, start to think of themselves as trans. And for some people, it's much later in life, right? As Ren had also spoken of. But the point is that it may be as early as 3. And now it's not as if every kid may come into a clinic with parents who are open to the child self-identifying their gender. So that's, I think, what makes it tricky, but not the question of whether a child may know their gender identity. So
I'll add one thing. Once the choices are there, the discussion starts. And once the discussion starts, education starts.
Absolutely.
So we should have the right forms and give this option to everybody.
So I'd also like to add one thing about what is our intent. So I think whenever we're going to change something, what is the intent behind change or not? So if we are saying that when a 2-year-old walks in, we can write male, female, then why can we not write this? So the question is not whether the child knows or not, according to me. The question is, are we including all possibilities? The person who is making the form, the society or the institution that is making that form, are they in their mind space looking at what the possibilities are? So true respect would be if this is actually included in any place where you are asking for gender or sex, regardless of who's filling it up. Because sometimes the parent will fill it, sometimes somebody else will fill it, sometimes because it's also something that you can say, I don't want to say this. It's a choice. So it's not about which choice, it's about, are we offering a choice which is respectful and inclusive and diverse intentioned. To me, the question is not what age should we be putting this. To me, the question is, what are the 3 things? Much like Amrita said, I would say preferred name, preferred gender, so that people ask the question, what does that mean? What would preferred gender mean? And from there starts, like Dr. Sanjay said, some conversation about why are you even writing that? And I'm speaking from the experience where at our clinic, we actually have done this. And we get a whole lot of conversation now, whether it's parents or anyone. And the objective was not about, do I need to get the demographic data of how many? The objective was, can we be gender affirmative? Can we be trans friendly? Can we be friendly and respectful to every human way of being by offering the options? So that's just a slightly different perspective.
All right, I think we're going to move on to Q&A. And the way that I think we're going to do this is we have a few questions here. And oh, yes, Pankuri.
Tia, we just have one more role play in just another 2 minutes.
Oh, no, fantastic. I'm so sorry in that case. Yeah.
So that's all from my side. Now I'd like to hand over to my teammates Jessica and Shambhavi.
Hello, everyone. So now what we're going to be showing you is a scenario. It's the conversation between 3 healthcare workers in a patient care setting.
दीदी, अब जरा बताइए ना, मैं इस पेशेंट को कहाँ ले जाऊँ?
ये क्यों पूछ रहे हो?
अरे दीदी, वो असल बात है कि उनके चेहरे पे मुझे मूंछ दाढ़ी दिख रही है और उन्होंने टीका लगाया हुआ है, पर साड़ी पहन के आए और नाम बता रहे मुझे सुनीता। आप ही बताइए, मैं कौन से वार्ड में ले जाऊँ इन्हें?
मेल वार्ड में लेके जाओ, क्योंकि फीमेल में नहीं लेके जा सकते।
अरे दीदी, आप उनसे बिना पूछे उन्हें क्यों लेके जा रहे हैं? उनसे पूछ तो लीजिए क्या वो मेल वार्ड में जाना भी चाहते हैं। नहीं, आप पहले उससे उनका नाम पूछिए और उसके हिसाब से उन्हें लेकर जाइए। अगर आपको आगे से कोई भी दिक्कत आए तो आप कुरेंशा को बुला लीजिए।
अरे दीदी, मैंने तो ये सोचा ही नहीं था, अभी उनसे पूछ के आए। आपने तो बड़ी अच्छी चीज दे दी, अगली बार से आपसे ही पूछेंगे। थैंक यू दीदी।
So we hope you like that. Now moving on to the question which we posed to the audience after this video. We'd like to ask, is there a medical necessity for gender segregated patient wards? If you'd like to answer, please put in the chat box or raise your hand. Again, I'll just repeat my question. is there a medical necessity for gender segregated patient wards? Dr. Sanjay, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, so what I feel is that if each person is respected and we provide a gender friendly space to them, then there is actually no need.
Dr. Shobini?
Yeah. So what I would say is that you need to create spaces the way people wish to avail them. So while I do agree that there have to be spaces which are gender neutral, but there may still be requirement to have gender segregated spaces if that is how some people would like to be, boxed. So we have to take care of everybody and be inclusive. Over.
I think when we started to increase the age of pediatrics till 18 years of age, we continued same practice of keeping every child anywhere. And but lots many people thought that there should be adolescent male ward or adolescent female ward. We did not do it, not deliberately did not do it, but we could not do it somehow. But today I am feeling that this was a correct decision, whether it was taken or not taken, but it was happening right this year. So I don't know, but this was correcting with time being today.
Dr. Rastogi has a to make.
Not yet. The light has gone, so maybe you might see me in the dark right now. But am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
The segregation of the ward is in fact the necessity till the society evolved to a certain higher level. Now, most of the time in our admissions in the medical colleges or in hospital, you require an attendant. And most of the places with a female, you allow a female attendant in the female ward, not the male. So till the society is evolved, the segregation is desirable. Otherwise, there might be many untoward incidents which usually take place. So just to keep it in that mind, that's there. The Lady Harding, of course, I feel pride in it. I was faculty there in 90 to 93. You had a separate medical college for that. So the things are changing. Now the male ward has come up. I think I was there at that time, 90 to 93. Probably there was no, the male ward started in the drug de-addiction center. We were admitting male patient of, I don't remember right now, 91 we were admitting or 93 we were admitting. So we started admitting. So the change is happening. But to say categorically today, if we don't require it, let's first evolve to that level and then see.
Yes, Dr.
Kavita also wants to say something.
Yeah, so I wanted to say something, that hospitals are not necessarily only medical institutions, these are social institutions. So the intersectionality of society and social structures needs to be taken into account. These are not just medical institutions. The other thing that I would like to say is that admission and segregation of wards is not based only due to gender. We may say male and female wards, but the reasons why somebody is being put into a medical ward in gynecology and a male is not in the same ward, or another person is not in the same ward, may be very different from just the variable of gender. Or if somebody is having a surgery, And I'll tell you a little personal experience. Very recently, I was in the hospital, and in one of the hospitals, in a dual, so three beds were there in the same room, and it was gender neutral. And each of the patients, and this was a physical issue, somebody had a surgery, somebody had typhoid, somebody had something else, each one of them also had an attendant. So it was a milieu of 6 people. It was absolutely gender neutral. But the amount of times using one bathroom that each person had to do created so much discomfort for somebody who has been raised, a 67-year-old lady who has been raised in the gender stereotype of what is allowed. So these are all social structures. And medicine is not and cannot be practiced in isolation of social structures. There is so much intersectionality that linear thinking around these kind of solutions may not necessarily, it'll probably throw up different kinds of issues and different kinds of problems. So collaborative solution making and choice, rather than thinking of a solution and saying, is this how we do it or should we do it like this? It's far more about, can we provide the choices? And there I feel that in all kinds of healthcare, the respect and the power equation between the treating and the treated becomes the most important variable. If we can see the treating team and the treated as equal, you will have your answers. Thank you. Sorry to become so.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Kavita. Unfortunately, there are so many excellent questions and so many more like really cool things, but we are running extremely long on time. And before we sort of, before I hand over to Team Querencia, I would just like to thank all of the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Bittu. Thank you, Dr. Kavita. Thank you, Dr. Shobhini. Thank you, Ms. Amrita. Thank you to Dr. Jen as well for sparing time to be here with us. And genuinely, this is. I cannot thank you all enough for like coming together for this, and thank you so much for to Team Querencia for really putting this together. And it's all been because of the initiative showed by the students and the sort of like love that the panelists have put into this. Anyway, that's all for me. I've been Tia. I've been your moderator. Once again, a very sincere vote of thanks to everybody involved in this, and please take it away.
Sachidi, are you there? Dr. Sanjay, am I audible?
Yes, Pankaj, you're audible.
Hi, sorry, I'm here. I wasn't able to unmute.
Yes, can you please go ahead?
Yes. Okay, so with that, I think we've officially come to the end of our webinar. It was an introductory webinar on demystifying gender. And with that, I think Dr. Kavita also talked about our home ground in the beginning. And I think with Athi, the collaborative credit for organizing this ultimately goes to our home ground, which is Lady Hardinge Medical College. And we want to be able to credit our gurus for this. Yesterday was Guru Purnima, and this is how we have learned to be what we are today. And with that, there is a very special message from the LHMC Alumni Association, which we would like to play in the form of a video from Dr. Anju Jain, who is also previously the HOD for the biochemistry department in our college and now the director professor. So Pankuri, let's play the video. I'm sorry, Pankuri, but the voice is not. Can you share computer sound again?
Good evening to all participants. This web series of Demystifying Gender, Fostering Friendly Healthcare is an initiative of our medical students supported by the WHO Collaborating Center for Adolescent Health in India, Dr. Pemde, supported by our director, and the Association of Transgender Health in India. Our students have formed this group known as Querencia. The name intrigued me and I found that it was a Spanish word used in bullfighting. It is a place in the arena where the bull stands to draw inspiration and strength and feels that the place is most comfortable. Such an apt name for the task that our students have undertaken. This transgender issue is a largely ignored one in India, even though it has been legalized, but talking about it is still considered a taboo. Especially the problems, the health problems, the mental harassment faced by this part of the society is actually not dealt with at all. And the reason being, these people also do not come forward for seeking help. And they are not included in the society mainstream. I congratulate our dear students who have created the first ever group in the medical colleges, in Lady Harding being the first one, and I expect that more medical students would join in from Delhi and across. It is heartening to see our alumni, Dr. Kavita Arora and Dr. Shobhini Rajan, as well as our fourth year student Ishika Kaul, participate in today's webinar. As President of the Lady Harding Medical College Alumni Association, I extend my full support to this venture and congratulate and appreciate the efforts put in by the organizers. I wish that today's web series would be a success, and I wish the same for the forthcoming events. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think after this, we also have Dr. Richa, who also has a video message for us. So we'd like to play that as well. Again, I think we should take an opportunity to mention Dr. Kumkum as well, who couldn't be here, but she is also a fellow Hardonian and has sent her best wishes for this. And being the home ground for so many amazing, talented women also in our panel, it has been an absolute honor for us to host these people that we have been looking forward to being inspiring for practicing all our lives. And I think this is the time where I should probably give out a shout out to the entire team Querencia, along with Athi, who has been working extremely hard. So for the role play, we have a lovely first year juniors, Shambhavi, Jagrat, Sarvanishtha, and Jessica, who have really worked very hard. We also had a long social media campaign for which we had Harshita as well as Arshaneet, who actually made a blind react video, which is also available on the Instagram page of our team Querencia. For the media, as well as so many reels that we had created so beautifully, promoting all of our panelists, we have Gauri Nair. Of course, there are Pankhuri, Nidhi, and I, and Ishikadi, who is, of course, on the panel and has received such a beautiful feedback from everyone who is here. I think Pankhuri and Nidhi are the two second-year juniors who actually, basically, I think I have to come out and say this. Pankhuri and Nidhi are the people who actually gave birth to Querencia. I was just a person who was here supporting these people all along. And I think Pankhuri and Nidhi should be the people who should take the stage. And along with this, they were the people who actually are leading 60 other members who stand with all of us towards gender affirmative healthcare. So I think you two need to say a few words before this ends. Pankhuri, feel free to unmute yourself, please.
We want to see Richa ma'am's video now.
Yes, we do. Right after you finish speaking.
Varun sir, can you share Richa ma'am's video as well?
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here and proud of our young Hardonian advocates for leading such an important initiative. You are an inspiration to us all. On behalf of all the Hardonians living in North America, I bring you our best wishes and our commitment to supporting your action item. Over the next few years, we will be working closely with Dr. Aparna, her team, and fellow Hardonians towards helping to address healthcare issues related to transgender community. And for now, I look forward to today's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I think we'd like to officially hand over to Sanjay sir for our vote of thanks, because Athi has worked very, very hard, and we would really like to hear what the great, amazing mastermind has to say about all of this. So, Dr. Sanjay, over to you.
Well, I always wanted to do this. I'm going to say woo, woo. It's amazing. It's amazing. And believe you me, we have set out on a journey that we are going to demand that the medical profession opens up its gates to people who need care. After all, we got into this business to give care. And if we can respect each human being for what they are and not what they appear to be, if we can stop, making assumptions and listen, because that is the first thing that was taught to us when we entered, that listen and provide care. It is not about you. It is about that human being who is there in front of you, who has come to you with hope. Don't shatter that hope. And it is the young medical students who now need to tell, they need to educate, and they need to become the libraries and the textbooks which the professors need to now listen to, now look at, and provide. I'm going to give you I'm not going to go into a vote of thanks. There is no thanks involved, because all of us, we needed to do this. And those of us who could not, believe you me, they want to be here. And that is why we said, let's have a series so that nobody can say I was not given a chance to speak. So the next one is on 15th of August, a very important day. And therein, we are going to become specific. We're going to talk about mental health, affirmative mental health care. We are going to talk about affirmative care for children and adolescents. We are also going to touch upon a little bit upon fertility preservation, because these dialogues need to happen at a very early age. We need to have dialogues. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to ask Varun to put up the dialogue that I have for you. And this is a birth certificate. And I want you to look at it for 30 seconds. So Varun, can we have this birth certificate up? Because this is the dialogue that we want, which should start with the time that the child comes into the world and a parent has an opportunity to talk. I will draw your attention to this small line that we have put. Sex assigned at birth, male, female, ambiguous, gender to be affirmed by the child later. I leave you with this thought, and registration is going to open. Do register. Do talk about this among your friends, with your colleagues, and let's have more participation in the next webinar, which happens on the 15th of August. Time, we will tell you as soon as we freeze it. And we have very interesting array of speakers. I won't say they are better than the ones we had today, but I am sure they will match them. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Sir, if you do not mind, can we take a picture with our remaining guests and our participants?
Let me get my moochies right.
I request all of you to please switch on your cameras. Nidhi, can you also take the pictures, and anybody else on the team who can take, so that I just don't miss out on anybody. All right. So set in your smiles, clicking in 3, 2. Oh, also 4 pages, so you'll have to stay on like that for about 5 minutes. 3, 2, 1. You're done with page 1. Going on to page 2. Okay. Going on to page 3. And page 4. Done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.